Right. Good morning, members, officers and any member of the public who are attending this meeting either in person or remotely or viewing on the webcast. Welcome to this meeting of South Cambridgeshire District Council. Today we mourn the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and we are going to begin the meeting by those of us who can stand, please stand, and we will observe a 2-minute silence. Thank you. Please be seated. I should like to start the meeting by inviting the leader of the opposition group, Councillor Heather Williams, to say a few words.
Thank you, Leader. Her Majesty the Queen has been a huge part of all of our lives. For most of us, she is the only monarch we have ever known. There are no words to describe this unique sense of sorrow that we are left with. The Queen was our monarch, our head of state, defender of the faith, head of the Commonwealth and Colonel-in-Chief of our armed forces, but also a daughter, a sister, a mother, an aunt, a grandmother and great-grandmother, something which all of us will find some common traits with. So many roles that Her Majesty managed seamlessly and with grace. Her Majesty the Queen was the finest public servant we have ever known, an exemplary role model for those of us who seek to serve our communities. The Elizabethan age that we have had an honour to live in has seen such change, advancement and progress, but the reassurance that our Queen provided remained constant throughout. Her Majesty has shown leadership in so many crucial periods of concern and worry for her peoples. From World War II, reassuring evacuees at 14 and learning to be a mechanic, through to the recent pandemic. For the last year, Her Majesty the Queen has continued to serve us without the support of His Royal Highness the Prince Philip by her side, who the Queen affectionately referred to as her strength and stay. It has been Her Majesty that has been our strength and stay for all these years. Our thoughts and prayers are with the whole royal family, especially His Majesty King Charles III, as he now must follow in the footsteps of his mother and what example she has set, and may her legacy live on for many years and generations to come. My words are a joint statement of myself and former Conservative group leaders Peter Topping, Ray Manning and David Bard, and from Conservative councillors both past and present, we say in full voice, may God bless our Queen, God save the King.
Thank you very much. The end of the second Elizabethan age was always going to be really sad and really hard to bear. Coming so soon after 3 years of a pandemic and so many sad losses of life, it is even sadder and even more hard to bear. The Queen's dedication to over 70 years of public service can hardly be imagined by those of us in this room. Last week, a light went out in the world, and our world shifted into a new and as yet unknown age. Our very deepest sympathies rest with the much-loved family of Queen Elizabeth II, and our very best wishes for the future we pass on to King Charles III and his family. Right. So, going back to business. So just a few housekeeping rules. Only those members present in the chamber will be able to move and second motions and vote today. Members present virtually can, of course, speak in the debate. If members attending virtually wish to speak, can they please use the chat in the Teams meeting? And those present in the chamber, just raise your hands. So can I begin by confirming that the meeting is quorate?
Yes, it is.
It will. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right, so can we start with item 2, which is apologies for absence, please?
Apologies from Councillor Peter MacDonald and John Williams.
Thank you very much. And item 3, are there any declarations of interest pertaining to items on today's agenda? No, we have no declarations of interest. And the minutes of the previous meeting, members are asked to approve the minutes of the meeting held on Monday, the 11th of July, 2022. I move the approval of those minutes as a correct record. Is that second? I think that's seconded by...
Yes, it's seconded by myself.
Right. Are there any comments on the minutes? No. So do members agree to approve the minutes? Anyone wish to vote against? And anyone wish to abstain? So Cabinet therefore agrees the approval of the minutes as a correct record by affirmation. Public questions. We had received a request for a question on behalf of Mr. Daniel Fulton of Fuse Lanes Consortium, but Mr. Fulton has indicated he wishes to withdraw the question. So moving on to item 6, issues arising from the Scrutiny and Overview Committee. Councillor Anna Bradnam from the committee is here and would like to report back from the recent meeting.
Thank you very much, Leader. We've had an excellent report from Mr. Senior, and which covers the business of the meeting. And it's worth pointing out it was a slightly unusual meeting because we did not have any material to scrutinise, but we took the opportunity to consider some aspects of the Council's work that we might wish to have reports on, and that is the content of the report that Mr. Senior has put in front of us. But if anybody wishes to ask any questions, I can give more detail if they wish it.
Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. Does any member of Cabinet wish to ask any questions? And anyone else? No? Thank you very much. Members, you're asked to note the report. Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. So item 7 is the Q1 performance report. And Councillor Judith Rippeth is going to introduce the report and move the recommendation, and I am going to second it.
Thank you. I'd like to start by saying how much we all, I think, value the work of officers with putting this together and the continued work of the Council, and with some very positive KPIs this last quarter that we're looking at here. something I'd like to point out, which I think often gets missed, is the planning KPIs are looking particularly good, especially on those major applications where quite unusually for local planning authority, there are a number of new towns being developed and massive, things going on. And I'd just like to commend the work of that, the shared planning service. And, to me, that is excellent and excellent progress, especially with the backlog having been cleared on the householder applications. And another area I would like to highlight is the ICT and the streaming of the meetings, and that targets have been met. There hasn't been a longer than 5-minute interruption, and over the past year or so, I'd say that's been really quite seamless, and also opens up democracy to more people to be able to watch and listen and not having to actually be in the building. Aside from that, I think it's quite evident in the report in front of you, and I'd like to recommend this report to Cabinet.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Rippeth. Are there any questions from Cabinet? No. Any questions from any other members present? No? Okay. So just to sum up, I think we did extraordinarily well maintaining our performance levels during the pandemic. And I think, the evidence now that we're, hopefully coming out of the pandemic is that we're seeing those maintained levels improve. So, tremendous amount of work by all our officers throughout the organisation. There's a lot of information and narrative in this report that is very, very well worth reading. So I think it's Kevin, isn't it, who puts this all together. So many thanks. These reports just get better and better, and more useful actually as a day-to-day reference document. Actually, they're not something that then just goes off to gather dust on the shelf. So thank you very much. So the recommendation is set out at paragraph 3 of the report. I won't read it all, but I'm sure members have read it. Do members agree with the proposal? Anyone wish to vote against? And anyone wish to abstain? No. So Cabinet therefore agrees the proposal by affirmation. That's fine, thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. So we are moving swiftly on to... Sorry, I've jumped ahead of myself here. That's because I've lost a page, that's right, okay. So item 9, item 8, Anglia Water Drainage and Wastewater Management Plan. We've got a slight amendment which can be put onto the screen to just make life a bit simpler. Councillor Toomey Hawkins is going to present this, and I'm happy to second it. So over to you, Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, everyone. The paper in Appendix A is our draft response to the Anglia Water Drainage and Wastewater Management Plan consultation that started on the 30th of June and is closing on the 16th of September. Anglia Water, as we know, is the statutory undertaker for provision and management of wastewater drainage systems. And like us, that we have to create a strategic local plan, Anglia Water also has to do the same for their services. The Drainage and Wastewater Management Plan is the 25-year strategic plan that Anglia Water is setting out how it intends to extend, improve, maintain, and manage the wastewater systems in its area of operation. And of course, it covers the whole of the eastern part of England, of which we are a part. I just want to draw attention also to paragraph 8 on page 52 of our agenda, where we say the plan also forecasts growth to assist planning to meet the needs of future customers. And while it focuses on committed growth, it also acknowledges that planning for other development is taking place. And whilst many of these schemes are at an early stage and therefore not included yet in adopted local plans, it's important to consider their impact on the long-term strategy, should they come forward. So they know. And of course, the local plans, not just in our areas, but of other areas, we also emphasize the need for them to continue to engage with us, obviously. Now, just to say, the consultation itself is sort of 12 high-level questions, no details. It's asking what we prefer, this or that or the other. But as you will see from the response, we emphasize that it is imperative that the future drainage investment addresses the potentially serious water qualities that we face here in Greater Cambridge area, as the current levels of pollution pose a threat not only to public health, but to wildlife and the amenity of our rivers. We also state in the answer in question 2 in the appendix, the urgency of resolving this matter for our area. And it means that they might have to justify a different set of priorities than other areas that Anglia Water actually operates in. I found this strange in question 8. It says, how much do you support a partnership working? Hello? Of course we do. And we state that very clearly, especially given the challenging water resource situation we have here. And we emphasize the need to explore opportunities for water reuse and engage with Cambridge Water, who are the statutory water undertakers for Greater Cambridge area. Of course, we emphasize the need to engage with other bodies such as our internal drainage boards, and especially address the concerns we know we have at Ottons Grove. We have had a request to strengthen part of our response, which is part of question 1. And I will just read that out, just so we know what it is. Where it says, however, reducing pollution, minimizing pollution incidents from storm overflows, and as a result, improving the water quality should also be a key priority for the drainage wastewater management plan and be implemented as soon as possible. And the addition, or the suggested addition, is improvements should be made to the monitoring undertaken and reported for Anglian Water's environmental performance assessment in order to provide, and then on to what we had before, clear information in a timely manner on such events. And another change and their environmental impacts, and then back to what we had, so the effectiveness of the management program in the future can be monitored, as you can see on the screen. This is a joint response with Cambridge City Council through the Shared Planning Service. And as such, I hope that you will agree that the suggested responses in the appendix are good for us to send over, and I therefore ask for your support for the recommendations in paragraph 3 of our report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Do any members of Cabinet want to comment? Yes, Councillor Mills.
Thank you. I welcome this response. And I think it should be seen that this is in a wider context of utility companies struggling to provide the requirements, and particularly in our high growth situation where we're building new tanks. We've seen the water sewage companies struggle. In fact, we have a local member who will remember well when a development was not unable to be occupied because the sewage system didn't have any capacity left. And we're in a situation where the water companies have, when they were privatised, or since they were privatised, we've seen large distribution of profits and much less money going into investment in infrastructure. So we absolutely need that investment to be made. We have a situation, for example, where stormwater is allowed to pass from the gully systems in the roads and go into the water system which then can't cope. And it's not just a capacity issue. A lot of the drains are blocked with fat, with nappies, with all sorts of detritus that stops them. And we've had situations in our locality where people have had sewage water rising up into their gardens and backflow in their toilets. It's not acceptable. So this report has to be seen, I think, in that context. And I welcome our response to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other Cabinet members? No. Can I invite Councillor Sue Ellington to speak?
Thank you. As many of you know, I go off on one fairly regularly about water in one way or another, and especially drainage. But can I, and therefore I welcome this response, which errs on the side of caution rather than saying all is well. Can I just make one correction? On page 52, under number 9, it talks about over the Utton Drove site. Utton's Drove is not in Over. Utton's Drove is the sewage works, which is just off the A14. The facility in Over is called Webb's Hole Sluice. And that, I'm sure those members who have been around a little while will be fed up with hearing about Webb's Hole Sluice before we're done. Thank you.
We're lucky to have you, Councillor Ellington, with your level of detailed knowledge. So that correction, let's go to Jonathan. That correction can be made.
Councillor Ellington is obviously quite correct. However, the report itself rather confusingly does use the overcatchment in terms of its references to it. So whilst you are entirely correct, that is a reference correctly made to the report.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And sorry. Oh, Councillor Bradnam. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I too welcome this report, but note as well with appreciation that it is written in cautious terms, in the sense that it anticipates that we need to do maybe more. And I know it's not the right moment to ask, but I will anyway. My concern is that our water treatment works are required by Act of Parliament to accept sewage flows. They cannot refuse, and they are entitled under current law and legislation to release waters to water bodies when they have to, if they cannot cope with the volume. And so I would have wished, I know this is a response to the Anglian Water wastewater treatment plan, but I just wondered if we could have put in here a request for action at a higher level, because the water treatment companies are working within the legislation that exists. So what we need to do is to seek amendment to that legislation if we can. But I appreciate this is possibly not possible within the terms of this response, but I feel it would be stronger if we could make reference to that.
Okay, I'm going to ask Liz Watts to comment in the first instance.
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor Badnam, you're absolutely right. On both counts, it would be, you know, a strong message to send about changing the legislation, but I think this is the wrong place to do it. And so I think that would be for another place.
Jonathan, do you want to add anything to that? No, okay, fine. Any other questions? Okay, so I know the comments about caution. This got, you know, very, very robust, you know, informal cabinet looked at this in a very, very robust and very, very challenging way. And, you know, this is a high level a very high-level document. I think there's going to be further consultations to come where, you know, that we can really, you know, start to hit hard on the detail. But I think we've gone as far as we can with this consultation, and I welcome the changes that Councillor Hawkins has suggested today. So, I beg your pardon. Sorry, you've reminded me 3 times. Councillor Harvey, my apologies.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Smith. I wanted to just give some of the background on behalf of Councillor Pippa Heylings as her Vice Chair on the Climate and Environment Advisory Committee. But the 2 amendments that she asked the leader for planning, Councillor Toomey Hawkins, if she would consider adding, which she's spoken about previously in this item. If I could just give some of the background to that. So as Councillor Heylings would have pointed out had she been here, that in July of this year, the Environment Agency gave only 2 stars to Anglia Water for its environmental performance. And a month earlier, in June 2022, Ofwat decided to continue its enforcement case against Anglia Water, which began in March 2022, investigating how they manage their wastewater works, despite or as a result of further information provided by the company. And one of the key concerns is the lack of adequate and appropriate environmental and water quality monitoring being undertaken by Anglia Water in order for the reality of the situation regarding water quality and its impacts on human health, recreation and wildlife to be fully understood. And that was the basis on which Councillor Heylings asked for the 2 amendments to questions 1 and 2.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, if there's no further... Oh, so Councillor Hawkins, if you want to sum up.
Thank you, Leader. The second thing I actually missed out on question 2 was adding the phrase intermediate targets for removing discharge of untreated sewage, which from consultation with Jonathan seems to be okay, but there might be a challenge for Anglia Water because they had to invest. However, it's a request. So we can make the request, but you know, we're gonna, it's up to them as whether or not they can do it. So I just want to say thank you to all who have helped Jonathan and team to actually put this together. As you say, you know, we've had a lot of discussion about it, and this is as far as really we can go, given that they're providing the service to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. So I hope our responses reflect the concerns that our residents have expressed, albeit, you know, the level of detail isn't there. So moving on, the recommendation is set out at paragraph 3, and that's to agree the response and agree to grant delegated authority to make any sort of minor amendments, but also to include the amendments that Councillor Hawkins has articulated today, which have been displayed. So, do members agree with the proposal? Agreed. Anybody wish to vote against? And anyone wish to abstain? So Cabinet therefore agrees the proposals by affirmation. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to Councillor Harvey and Councillor Ellington for the detail which they've helped our conversation with. So moving on to item 9 now, which is the revenue and capital budget monitoring. And this would normally have been presented by Councillor John Williams, but he's on leave at the moment, so I'm afraid you've got me. And it's being seconded by, and it's being seconded by Councillor Judith Rippeth. So this is the first quarter, and not surprisingly, as a first quarter monitoring report, there's a number of uncertainties. We're currently reporting an underspend of 1.275 million, but some of this includes income that actually wasn't anticipated. So I'm pleased to note that at the end of June, we had dispersed 88% of the energy support package. That's in this grant, it's actually now 91%. And obviously, we will continue to monitor all budgets carefully as we proceed into a period of financial uncertainty. And the briefings I've had at LGA from the fiscal bodies is that there's never been more uncertainty in the finances in public life at the moment. It's really unhelpful. But hopefully, as government stabilises, so, we will learn whether we're going to get that 2-year settlement, and we'll have greater clarity over the income that we're going to derive from new homes bonus and from business rates and so on. So, the LGA and the District Council network in particular are being very, very strong in their ask of government and of new ministers that we have some certainty over our incomes in order that we can plan our business well ahead. So, are there any questions from Cabinet members? No? Any questions from anyone else? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Leader. Just a few questions. First of all, on page 68, there is a significant variance shown on the Housing General Fund. Just wondered if we could have a bit more commentary as to what that is, given its significance. Figure of 234%. I always get confused when we go over 100% of things. To me, that's a mathematical thing, I know, but to me 100 is 100, it's surely the full. The other on page 78, where we have 100% in the red. We then have the new homes programme on 80% variance. And my concern here is these things are in green, I can understand, because they're sort of underspends, but there is a danger as well to an underspend as much as overspends. So I am wondering, as you have like four or five colours in the other systems, whether actually underspends that aren't savings, but they're due to perhaps something not having happened that should have, is more easily identifiable. And on page 79, in relation to the rent received being because of a void property, just wondering if, since the report was written, if we've had any interest. Appreciate you can't say who, but if we've had any interest, Leader. I think that's it for the moment.
Thank you very much indeed. I think we have to bear in mind this is Q1, and so you do expect to see variances then. But I'm going to ask Peter Maddox to add the detail onto your questions, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the first question related to the Housing General Fund. I need to double check, but I suspect that's possibly the receipt of the money for disabled facilities grants perhaps earlier than we expected. I think we had the same thing last year. So we may need to look at the profile and profile it into Q2 in future. Second question was that the 433 on page 78? Yes, now this relates to a vehicle, I think it was one of the electric vehicles that we were due to receive. We were due to get that in March, and it didn't arrive until April. So we will need to carry some money forward from last year's budget into this year's budget to fund that. And then new homes programme was, again, I think there's been significant slippage, and I think there's some money to be carried forward as well in relation to that from last year. So I don't know whether there's any specific projects that relates to. Is there any more? Just trying to see whether there's any more detail in the actual tables in relation to that. If I can find it.
Leader, I'm happy to take a response afterwards if that's
Yeah,
helpful.
we can look at, yeah, I mean, it refers to, oh, that's right, it refers to a delay in relation to the Boxworth and Swavesey project. And if my memory serves me right, that 2 million that was expected in Q1, we're expecting it the next few weeks. Oh, investment properties, yeah. What? Yeah, so we're still trying to get tenants in relation to this. I think we've had some difficulty in getting tenants in relation to 270. So this is the property that it's referring to. We had thought we would have somebody in by now. Again, I can find out a bit more detail on where we are with that, if you like. That'd be fine. Okay.
Do you want to come back with anything else, Councillor Williams?
No, thank you, Leader. I will take the offer of some more info in writing. Thank you.
That's fine. I know Mr. Maddox will always be happy to talk about any detail with you outside of a meeting, which might be more useful, actually. Are there any other questions? No, in which case we will go to the recommendations and the vote on this. So the recommendations set out at paragraph... Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I think I said you were seconding, but would you like to say you're seconding? Absolutely.
Yes, I agree to second the report.
Lovely. Do you want to say anything?
No, I think it's been quite well covered.
Okay, thank you very much. So recommendations set out at paragraph 3 of the report. Do members agree with the proposal? Anyone wish to vote against? And anyone wish to abstain? So Cabinet therefore agrees the proposals by affirmation. And item number 10 is the 21-22 Provisional Housing Revenue Account outturn, and Councillor John Batchelor is going to introduce the report and move the recommendation, and I am happy to second it.
Thank you very much, Leader. So just to emphasise, this is at the actual outturn for financial year 21-22. In revenue terms, it's pretty well on budget. There was just a small differential of 29,000. The area where there is some significant difference is on the capital programme. So you recall this is 21-22. COVID was still very much with us, and quite a number of the new build projects were running over because of the difficulties developers were having with staffing and in procuring materials. So there was a slippage of nearly £2 million on that one. It doesn't mean anything is lost. These are being rolled over to this year, and all these projects are moving forward. The detail of that you can find on page 97, which shows the various projects. As you'll see, many of them were still to be finished at the end of the financial year. Other than that, I'm happy to recommend the proposals at item 4 on page 91. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you know, it's still we're still in challenging times, but I think actually we're doing extremely well. Are there any questions from any members of Cabinet? No. Any questions from anybody else? I said I was seconding it. I know, introduce John. That's okay. Any other questions on this? No. In which case we'll go straight to the recommendations, which are set out in paragraph 4 of the report. And it's very long, so I won't read it all. Do members agree with the proposal? Anyone voting against? And anyone wishing to abstain? No? Okay, so Cabinet therefore agrees the proposals by affirmation. And finally we come to, item 12, which is the 4-day working week. Hang on. Oh, that says 12 on my thing here, is it? Okay. Oh, sorry, it's 11. It's wrong on my crib sheet here. Item 11, the 4-day working week. So obviously, this has taken up quite a lot of our time in the last couple of weeks and has attracted considerable attention on this council. So why are we doing this? So, as we all know, there is a national crisis in local government in recruitment and retention of staff. It is countrywide. It's not just sector specific, though we know that planning, building control, so on, HGV drivers, are very, very difficult to attract to local government. In South Cambridgeshire, I think things are even more difficult for us because it's jolly expensive to live here. So I think as a council, over the last few years, we have done just about everything we can to make ourselves an attractive and really good employer. We've introduced all sorts of different things so that our staff know that we really care about them, that we are very, very concerned that their health and their well-being and their mental health in particular is cared for. We have flexi-hour working, which I know a lot of people find very, very attractive indeed. But the fact of the matter is it's not enough to solve the problems that we have. So this year we have filled 8 out of 10 of our vacancies, and the first 3 months of this year it was only 50% of our vacancies. And in recent weeks, we've advertised some jobs which, would have been some years ago considered really attractive, and you would have expected lots and lots of applicants, and there haven't been any. So, it's very competitive out there. We are competing not just with other local authorities, but we're competing with the private sector, and it's not a level playing field. They can offer so much more money. They can offer cars, they can offer all sorts of perks, which we simply can't do. We've been looking at our income. We know that government is not just going to give us more and more money so that we can pay higher and higher wages. It's just not going to happen. So, we have to look at innovative ways of doing this. So, we are extremely lucky that we have a senior leadership team led by Liz Watts in this council who, look at innovation. We've introduced lots of innovation over the last few years. We're not afraid to be the first. We're not afraid to try new things. We're not afraid to fail because, the only way you avoid making mistakes or failing is not to do anything, and not doing anything is not an option here. Something has to be done. So there's been considerable research that's gone on over, I think, probably a longer period of time than I'm aware of, looking at the work that's gone on in the private sector nationally, but also globally. And I was very excited to get a call which said New Zealand on my phone from the global lead of the 4-day week campaign. So, we have attracted significant attention. So, we know that if this is done properly, if there's considerable time and effort spent on the preparation, if it is co-produced with the staff, it's not a top-down, you will do it this way approach. We know that it works in the private sector. And there have been some extraordinary accounts of significant improvements in productivity, up to the tune of sort of 40–45%, but also significant improvements in staff's health and well-being. And we also know that just working longer and longer hours does not increase productivity. Longer and longer hours makes people stressed and less productive. And we know that in the 21st century, we have to be mindful of staff's health and well-being because then they will do their best for us. So this is a 3-month preparation period that's being proposed here, which is going to be very intense to get this all ready to go. It will launch in January on the proviso that the preparation has gone well and it's ready to go. If it's not ready to go, then that period will be extended. and then a three-month period. During that period, we will be monitoring all sorts of things. There has been a health and well-being assessment done on all our staff prior to them knowing that this was on the table, so that we have very good baseline data. And we will be very carefully looking at the impact on staff's health and well-being. We've also looked today at all our KPIs, and we will be looking even closer and more regularly at the KPIs and what our performance is. If there is an indication that performance is dropping off, then there will be an immediate review over what we were doing, because at the very least, this has to maintain performance levels. At best, it will improve performance levels. So this has been rolled out to the office-based staff, if Cabinet agree today, in the first instance, a three-month trial. Obviously, we have no desire to create a two-tier system within our staff. So, if this goes well within the office-based staff, the next stage is to trial it at the depot. And, I've now had contact with a number of councils who collect the bins 4 days a week, albeit, they do it on sort of compressed hours, but it does already exist. Newcastle do it, and they say they don't collect the bins on a Monday, and the attraction of that is you don't have all the disruption caused by bank holidays. And they have an agreement that they're collected on a Saturday when there's a Friday statutory holiday. So that works for them. So there's already examples where, we're beginning to see this working within those frontline staff as well. So that would be the next stage. And I'm told that, it's possibly not so difficult as one might at first expect, but fortunately we have outstanding senior leadership who are they're all problem solvers, and I have every confidence that they will solve those problems. So, as far as going back to the original motivation for this, which is improving staff, attracting the talent we need, and also encouraging that talent to stay. And we are already a council of massive talent, but we need to hang on to these. We need to hang on to all of you in this room and anyone else listening. We don't really expect to see the impact of that in the first 3 months, because it just will be a trial. We think those benefits will be seen further down the line. So if at the end of 3 months this is looking good, then the trial will be extended for a year or whatever. Obviously those decisions will have to be made. And then, we hope to start seeing that actually we are an employer of choice. We are somewhere where people think, well, actually, South Cambridgeshire is different to other councils. Okay, they can't offer me the same sort of money that the private sector offer me, but actually what they're offering me is a work-life balance. They're offering me better health and well-being than any other public sector organisation. And there's been considerable interest in this from other councils of all political colours. And in fact, we're going to have to manage how many people want to come and visit, how many council leaders and their chief execs want to come and visit us. Because actually we've got a big piece of work to do and we don't need to be distracted from that. But there will be considerable interest from the whole sector. So it is a trial. I am personally really quite excited by this. The response from staff has been really interesting, and in some cases quite emotional as well. This is really, really important. This could be the game changer of people's lives. If you have caring responsibilities, as I do for my mum, or for children, suddenly there's an extra day a week where you can pick the children up from school, or you can have lunch with your mum, and that potentially makes us attractive as an employer to a different element of the workforce. People for whom a 5-day week, 9 to 5, doesn't work. So suddenly there might be more people who we can tap into. So I've talked far longer than I normally do, but I am going to invite Liz to talk, to fill in any errors that I have made. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention that the Chief Executive of Cambridge City Council has asked that Cabinet provide reassurances to Cambridge City Council and Cambridge residents about the potential impact of the trial on planning services, as well as the implications for partnership working between both councils during the pilot phase.
Get back on script, Bridget. Okay, so I'm reading this, yes. So what's been prepared is, given the sensitive nature of this decision and implications for South Cambridgeshire District Council staff, including the August baseline data we will use to measure performance during the pilot, we were not able to involve the City Council as much as we would have liked to have done. However, we fully expect city officers to be involved in the planning phase, and we will provide formal updates to the City Council Strategy and Resources Committees so that plans can be scrutinised, suggestions and recommendations provided, etc. If the pilot is successful, we expect City Council members to play an active role in any decision to expand the pilot to other services. For example, the Greater Cambridge Shared Waste Service, or to make it a permanent policy. I want to offer my full reassurance that this is a learning opportunity, and we'd like City colleagues to be supportive and an active partner in our 4-day-week pilot. Based on the evidence of similar pilots around the world, we do expect, as I've already said, significant benefits for staff as well as residents, including in Cambridge. The quality of services to residents will be a key measure of the trial, and I look forward to working with colleagues from the City on reviewing all of the data once it's available. I probably should have said that before I went off on a very long ramble. My apologies for that. Okay, now I'm sure there's questions. We'll start with Cabinet first of all. Yes, please.
I will be happy to second this item, but would like to speak at the end of the item.
Right, any questions for Councillor Mills?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's been clearly a lot of public debate about this proposal, and we know there's some misinformation, misconceptions about how this would work, and serious concern from the public that we'll only be here 4 days a week was one of those misconceptions. So I think it's really important that we lay out for the public the impact of this. I think there's a genuine question that says, if you reduce the working time by 1 day, you lose 20% of the time that the people are working, how can that deliver increased productivity to compensate? And I think that's a genuine question that we would clearly hopefully see after the trial. And interesting that there seems to be a political divide, at least locally, in this regard. I see some questionable criticism from a local MP. We saw Anna Bailey, for example, making comments about this, but interestingly running a poll that said, do you approve of the idea? And she probably got an unexpected result of 75% of those answering said, yes, they did approve of the idea of running such a trial. So I'm just conscious that we need to handle this well, give reassurance to the public that services won't be impacted by this trial.
Okay, I'm going to comment on what you've said, but I'm going to ask Liz Watts too as well. So, you know, this is really it's an operational decision. It's, you know, it shouldn't, this isn't really about politics, it's operational. And I think we have to remember that, you know, this council is all of our council, all of our officers, you know, regardless of, what party we are aligned to. So it's incumbent on, you know, all members of this council to want to make this work and to do our bit. And there will be a role for members as well. So, you know, I kind of hope people will reserve judgment and, you know, see how things go. And, you know, and then I hope cross-party we will be able to work together to see what the future holds. On some of your points, so obviously, you know, the council won't only be open 4 days a week. I'll let Liz elucidate on that. You know, we've actually had some conversations about the contact centre in some shape or form being open longer hours, and perhaps even having a late night opening, which I think would land very, very well. And as you know, this is about different ways of working. Now, quite what those different ways of working look like, I think we don't know yet. I think that's where the co-production with our staff comes in, because I think, you know, what it looks like in a bank, as has been trialled in Newcastle, probably is different from what it looks like in an IT company or in local government. So I think we've got to work out ourselves what those different ways of working are. But Liz, do you want to come in there?
Oh, thank you, Chair. I mean, just picking up on that last point, all of the evidence shows that successful trials are successful because they do involve everyone who's impacted by the change. And you know, for those of you who have been involved in large-scale change management programs, they generally work a lot better when the people who are having the change done to them actually decide how the change is done. So it's really important that we spend, assuming that you approve the trial this morning, that we spend the next 3 months working with colleagues, with the unions, with our partners at the City Council, and with you as members to plan really carefully how the trial will work. I fully accept your point, Councillor Milnes, about trying to be clear with the public about what we're doing. And of course, you know, if you were a private company and undertaking a trial like this, you wouldn't be doing it in, you know, under the public spotlight. But it's important that we're transparent. We're spending public money. And so we are doing it under the public spotlight. And as you say, therefore, it's really important that we're clear about what it does mean and what it doesn't. And you know, potentially we could put something, for example, in South Cambs magazine next issue, to be, you know, to explain a 4-day week, to explain how we're going to approach it, what it will mean for residents. And you know, I guess the bottom line for me is that in April next year, residents either won't have noticed the trial because there'll have been no change to the services that they receive, or they, you know, potentially could have noticed an improvement. That those would be the only two bases on which we would proceed to a longer term trial. And the 3 months is really, you know, I suppose a snapshot in time to say, can we do it? Can we make it work in the council before we go to a longer trial?
Thank you very much. Councillor Handley.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm really supportive of this, but I'd like to sort of echo Councillor Milne's concerns that, although I agree with you, Leader, it's an operational matter, it is so counterintuitive that staff do more with less, that there's endless scope for political mischief. And we've already seen it coming from, as Brian said, you know, we've already seen it coming from the usual MP. So I do think I would like to be assured that we are going to have a very good, very strong comms policy on this to get our answers out before the criticisms come in, if we can.
So I've almost lived with Gareth and Tom and Catherine actually in the last 10 days or so. They have been, I mean, Tom in particular has, you know, worked incredibly hard to, you know, to manage our communications. And, you know, we had a lot of interest. You know, I bizarrely, as some people know, did an interview with Radio Canada last Monday morning. So lots of interest. But so I quite agree. You know, it's really complicated and it is counterintuitive. And I had an interesting conversation with some lovely residents in my village who firstly told me that they just loved the bin men and women. They were their very, very favourite service in South Cambridge, and how fabulous they were. And they obviously go out and talk to them every day, I think, and stop them collecting the bins. But you know, this didn't land well with them because they didn't understand it. So, you know, we've got to, as we learn more about it, we've got to be constantly, you know, explaining how it's evolving to people because it is difficult. So it's a point well made. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Leader. Just to express my support for this trial. I know there's been a lot of attack from the usual sources on planning, and I appreciate the concern raised by the City Council Executive. But our planning service comprised of some seriously professional, dedicated people. I mean, I've seen the way they've worked over the last 4 and a bit years, and frankly, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what they have to do and how they do it. We are meeting our statutory targets with a lot of hard work from them. And I know that, you know, we've also been trying to work more effectively, which I think is what will be behind this trial working, is that, you know, we can find ways throughout the service of being more efficient, more effective, and just ensuring that, you know, we're all working to the same thing, which is to provide us a good service to our residents. So, yeah, I am in favor of this, and I think we will see something good come out of this. And of course, if I can get some more planners, that would be great, because a lot of our planners don't live in South Cambs. They can't afford to. So if we can get some more, that would be great.
Planners are gold dust, I must say. I think Councillor Bradnam, your hand went up first.
Thank you very much, Leader. I wholeheartedly support this. I think it's an extension of the work that fortunately had been set in place by our Chief Executive before COVID set, in flexible working and allowing people to work from wherever they were. And then COVID made that a really useful piece of work to have done. And this extends that into an even more, it empowers our employees and our officers, and I think it's an excellent step. And I'm glad that we're running a trial period. And I will just say, I think it's perfectly reasonable for the local MP to have expressed a view on it. He's perfectly entitled to do that. But my request would be, and I appreciate it's hard to monitor until certain stages have been reached, and we talked in employment and staffing about how a success would be monitored. But I would just like to ask, and I'm pleased that at paragraph 20 in the report, under the trial period, it's been mentioned that that there's going to be a sort of, and if the initial results are positive, the plan would be to continue the 4-day week during April and May, whilst we analyse the full results and report back to Employment and Staffing Committee and Cabinet in May 2023. But I was simply going to ask that if there are interim results, that they could be brought to Employment and Staffing. I'm assuming you mean before that. So there are meetings of Employment and Staffing on, obviously there's one on the 10th of November, but that's too early. But the 23rd of February, it would be interesting to hear an interim, even if a very informal report at that point. And our next, the Employment and Staffing Committee meeting is on the 18th of May. So I'd just like to have an early view from officers as to how it's going on that meeting of the 23rd of February, if we could. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, the role of the Employment and Staffing Committee is going to be really very significant. Liz Watts.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. It is one of the recommendations at paragraph 6 of the report that we bring update reports to Employment and Staffing on the 10th of November and the 23rd of February.
Thank you very much.
And they are going to have a brief, wider, more detailed briefing pretty soon. Unfortunately, that last meeting was curtailed. Yeah.
Thank you, and I don't yet have the dates for the Scrutiny Committee in Cambridge City Council, but we'll also be taking reports to them as well.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Ellington.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand the issues which have brought you to this point in consideration. But I have failed to find any 4-day week examples which are based in a service industry. Yes, I can well understand them being in an IT industry or in a production industry, but I think a service industry is very different. And I really look forward to seeing how that will roll out. I think the underlying thing that has come from discussion with my residents has been the concern that you are undervaluing the current staff by assuming that they're currently wasting 20% of their time. And that may create the opinion, a feeling of reputation within the staff that they are being undervalued, and that also may affect our residents' attitude to them, if you see what I mean. And I think you've got to work jolly hard to get that message across. I do hope this will bring further improvements in our recruitment position, but I do fear that it may be quite difficult to put the genie back in the bottle if it doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellington. I'm going to let Liz Watts respond in the first instance.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Ellington. There are certainly a number of examples of service industries that have adopted a 4-day week. In fact, there's a bank in Peterborough who have adopted a 4-day week, and a member of their senior management team was on Radio 4, I think, with Councillor Smith, talking about the experience and how well it had gone for them. I think where there are not so many examples is in public sector service, and there are a number of current trials going on, not in the UK in the public sector, but in the US, and I'm in contact with the academic who's leading the data analysis of those trials to see what we can learn from them. So there are kind of there are gaps in terms of some of the evidence base. I guess, you know, referring back to something that Councillor Milne raised earlier about, you know, being in the sort of in the public limelight, if you like, there are lots of public sector organisations who, while they may wish to undertake a trial or considering moving to a 4-day week, aren't kind of necessarily prepared for the intense sort of scrutiny that comes with it, and so I guess from my understanding, that's why there are fewer public sector organisations. I don't think it's not possible to do in the public sector. In terms of undervaluing staff, I mean, I think that's an interesting take on the approach. So I think if you look at the experience of COVID and when we all started working from home, I think there was a feeling before COVID that working from home was, you know, was a bit of sort of taking a bit of a day off. And it was only when we actually started running the entire council from home that we realised that actually lots of our colleagues are way more productive at home because they don't have the disturbances that they have in the office. And sometimes those disturbances can be good. It's about meeting colleagues and being social and interacting. Sometimes you just need some quiet time. And so I think that the situation is probably the same in terms of a 4-day week. And so I suppose we don't know what we don't know. Lots of colleagues have said to me, actually, you know, if you really want to know what I think about how I could be more productive, it's A, B, and C. And those colleagues haven't said that to me previously because I haven't offered them the opportunity to do that. And people don't always want to, you know, I suppose, come forward and make kind of, you know, potentially sort of quite bold statements about their own work and how it could be more productive. But I think the other thing to say is that there is clear evidence that productivity decreases as hours increase. There's a lot of evidence around that. So the question is, can you increase productivity by decreasing hours and effectively making sure that the hours that you are working, you are not distracted, you're not in unnecessary meetings, you're not copying loads of people into emails who don't need to see them, you're automating what you need to, you're being a good colleague, and that's a really important thing. Quite often people will find that, you know, what stops me from doing something is that somebody else hasn't done something. And a collective approach to everybody wanting to make the 4-day week work should be able to help us address some of those issues and implement some really transformational change in the council that I think without that offer of the 4-day week, it may not happen. And we do know from, you know, transformation programs, you know, across the whole of the public sector that, you know, while the benefits may seem really deliverable, actually banking them, you know, getting them and delivering them doesn't always work because there's not a lot in it for the people who are affected by the change. The big difference here is that there's a huge amount in it for the people who are affected by the change. And so, it's sort of underpinned by the theory of social exchange, it's a reciprocal deal. So I, far from undervaluing staff, I think it's, you know, valuing staff to say to us, you know how you do your work and you know how you could do it better and you know what you need other people to do to help you be more effective. And that kind of collective conversation over the 3 months of the planning period is what we will undertake to try to improve things.
Thank you, that was really very interesting. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Leader. I do have a series of questions, but actually, before I start, because there's no point me asking them if not, I have always taken the view that everybody in this council elected to it cares about it, but they may have different approaches and different ideas as to how to do it. I think that extends beyond the walls of this council and for many people. So before I continue with my questions, Leader, could I just ask, will Cabinet appreciate that I have genuine concerns, may have a different view, and will it be respected, not dismissed, ridiculed, or described as mischievous? Because I don't believe it is, just because we have a different view. So before I proceed, could I have that assurance, Chair, because right now I don't.
Okay, so I'm very happy to give that assurance, and I can assure you that within my own group, this has been seriously challenged, and I don't imagine that actually you're going to ask any questions that haven't already been asked internally within my own group. And obviously, you know, a Cabinet we very much respect the challenge we get internally from our group, and we will similarly respect the challenge that we get from you and your group. The Employment and Staffing Committee is obviously a cross-party committee where there will, you know, I trust there will be free and open debate about this. You know, we are stepping into the unknown here. And as I said before, it might work or it might not work. If it does work, I hope that we all, as a council, members and officers, all take the credit. You know, because there's a role for us all to play here. And, you know, the challenge that we all give to this will help it, you know, will help Liz and her team to formulate a plan that works. You know, if we all just keep stum, actually those difficult questions and difficult issues won't be addressed. So it's perfectly right and proper. So I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Leader. So my questions are, how will this affect holiday entitlement, as that's normally calculated on hours? How will this affect statutory sick pay entitlement, as that is calculated on a daily basis? How many staff will we be taking below 16 hours a week? How many manpower hours are reduced through this plan? How many hours overtime are we currently relying on? And will overtime be paid if over 30 hours during the trial period. Are agency worker contracts also being reduced to a 4-day requirement? As if they're not, then we won't be really seeing the true effects of a 4-day week. How are we advertising new roles currently at the council on a 4 or 5-day basis? And any new starters, will they be going to a 30 or 37-hour week? Will this inflated pay rise mean a freeze on officer pay, or will there still be pay rise negotiations? How many man hours will it take for preparations in the coming months, as that is time that could be spent on other duties? Do you think it is right to separate white and blue collar workers in this way? Because there has been a lot of uncomfort about the terminology being used in that respect. Will those on market supplements keep such payments if this is successful? How will this affect those on performance-related pay, as they will now have less time to fulfil their performance? Does the leader agree that 3 months is not significant for any trial, especially as it is for the months of January to March, when taking annual leave is much lower? And if this is to be extended, can we be assured that the months of July and August would be included in a trial, as they have the highest leave rates? Does the leader and cabinet appreciate that there is unhappiness about this potential decision, and will that be taken into consideration during the decision-making process? We touched on Cambridge City, but have Cambridge City Council agreed to this? I'm assuming from what was said earlier, not. Will they reimburse us for planning services on the basis of the current arrangement and pay, or will their contribution reduced due to reduced provision of days and hours? Page 102 says selected councillors will be asked to be interviewed. Will this include any opposition councillors? And 2 other points. Does the leader believe it is right that Cabinet is making this decision today? For it is our view that a decision of this size and implications should be debated by full council. We have one literally in 10 days' time, to ensure all residents of South Cambridgeshire have a voice in a decision that will affect all residents of South Cambridgeshire. And finally, Leader, was it right that the national press were briefed and informed before our officers? Thank you, Leader.
Golly, that was a lot. Okay, there's an awful lot of detail there, which I can't answer. I'm sure Liz will pick up what detail she can, but I'll just pick out some things that you've said. So I think we need to be really careful with language like inflated pay rise, because that's not what this is about. So I think we need to be very careful about saying things like that. I'm absolutely happy that it is right and proper that Cabinet approve the trial. All right, this is approving a trial, and so the Cabinet is the right place to do that. Council's the decision-making body. This is going to a trial, so I think that's fine. On briefing the national press, everything, the timing was really critical for this. It was imperative that the assessment, the health and wellbeing assessments, were done, not in the knowledge that this was going to happen. So I think it was right and proper. But Liz might add some more to that. I think I'm going to pass on to Liz, and then if there's anything that you want to come back to me on specifically for me, then do. But there was a lot of questions of detail there.
Thank you, Chair. So just going through those questions from top to bottom, I think I can answer most of them. So holiday pay and statutory sick pay. Holiday and statutory sick pay. So the idea of the trial is that we change as little as possible in terms of, or we don't change anything in terms of terms and conditions, because the point of the 3 months is to ascertain, is it possible to operate on a 4-day week and still maintain our performance, and will we see an improvement in health and well-being? So there will be no changes to terms and conditions. So if you want to take a week of holiday, you take 5 days, and that includes the day that you would have had off if you are at work. So there's no changes to holiday or statutory sick pay. I don't have the detail to all of these next few questions. There was a question about people under 16 hours, and we have 9 of those. In terms of overtime, and will it be relied on? So we only approve overtime at the moment for specific kind of projects or specific pieces of work that we really need people to do. Of course, the idea of the 4-day week is that as people become more efficient and more effective, they're able to do their work in less time. So in principle, we wouldn't expect to be seeing people doing overtime other than those sorts of areas where there is a very specific piece of work that needs to be done. You know, we've said to colleagues, are you able to do some overtime? And you know, we have examples of that. For example, when we have something like the Ukraine project, and suddenly somebody's not only doing their day job, but also doing probably an entire extra day job as well. That it won't. You asked about agency officers, Councillor Williams, and we will not be including agency in the trial. The whole point is that we want to be able to obviously reduce the number of agency, but it's not that's the agency colleagues that we have at the moment will not be part of the trial. Although I think it's fair to say that the whole, you know, the planning period of 3 months, it isn't a period where, you know, I and my colleagues say to people, this is how we're going to do it. And if somebody made a compelling case for including agency, then of course that would be something that we'd consider. But we're at a starting point where we're saying this just applies to people who are on a South Cambs contract. Will we advertise new roles as, you know, being 4-day week? No, we won't, because we're nowhere near that position yet. I think it won't, you know, it won't escape people applying for roles that we're doing a trial. In fact, somebody mentioned to me last week that during an interview, somebody had said, you know, they were really excited to see that we were doing a trial, and they thought it was a really kind of progressive way of working. And so we certainly won't be advertising it. But I think people will probably know as they come for interview. New starters will not be put on a 30-hour-a-week contract. So for the purpose of the trial, everybody will stay on their original contract, whether that's 37 hours a week or part-time, depending on what kind of hours that you do. And so no, new starters won't be advertised on a 30-hour week. Is it an inflated pay rise? I think the point here is that you know, we pay people to do a job. We don't pay people to do a certain number of hours. And so if people are able to do the job, then their job has been graded at the salary for which we pay them. So I don't think it's an inflated pay rise. I think it's about an organisation that needs to address a really specific challenge, 2 specific challenges. One is about recruitment and retention, and one is about the health and well-being of our colleagues and their ability to work as productively as they can when they're in the office. I don't have details on the hours that it will take for the preparation during the 3-month planning phase. But I suppose what I would say there is that if those are hours that are being spent understanding as 470 colleagues, how can we be more effective? How can we be more productive? I think those would be hours well spent. And regardless of what happens in the trial, you know, if the trial were to be unsuccessful, I would be almost certain that there will be different ways of working after the trial that we will continue with, even if the trial doesn't continue. You mentioned about the difference between desk-based staff and staff in the depot. We've been really clear that the two trials will be very, very different. So the trial for desk-based staff is considerably more complex to plan for, because we're what's known as knowledge workers. Our knowledge, our expertise is what gets the job done, by and large. And so everybody works differently, and it's a real, I kind of make the analogy of a Rubik's Cube. We'll be changing the ways that we work, but we need to make sure at the same time that all the colours of the Rubik's Cube end up on the right side. And so it's a complex trial to plan for. The depot trial is less complex to plan for insofar as there is a limited number of ways in which you can collect bins. So that trial probably is slightly more, I suppose, paper-based in the sense of how do we organise the rounds, what would the impact be, and we can model this through on things like sick pay. Would people have less time off sick, and therefore potentially you'd make some savings there? What's the impact of agency staff? And so in a way that's more of, I suppose, a desk-based modelling operation as opposed to working with nearly 200 colleagues who collect our bins and say, how could you do your job differently? So they're different trials. I think, we could have done both trials at the same time. I think we're realistic that, that we don't want this to be a distraction, and so we basically decided to take the trials one after the other. Market supplement. So as I said, there'll be no changes to people's pay or terms and conditions for the 3-month trial. We will need to look at, if we were to extend for a year and then look at potentially moving to be a 4-day week employer, we would need to review all sorts of issues to do with our sort of employment terms and conditions, but we're nowhere near that stage yet. Same for performance-related pay. So you mentioned that you didn't think the 3 months was enough, and I completely agree with you there. But the 3 months is basically for us to be able to say, is everything still working at the end of 3 months? Are we still delivering, strong performance in all of our services? And have we seen some benefit from our colleagues? So those are the two things that we're testing in the first 3 months. If that's all positive, we will move, as it says in the paper, to a year-long trial, and that's when we really test things like recruitment and retention. So the 3 months is really, I guess, can we make it work period of trial, and then we'll be followed by the longer trial. Interestingly, in terms of annual leave, you said you were concerned about January to March. Actually, because our annual leave year now ends at the end of March. Quite often, annual leave can be quite high in January and March, because people are using up the end of their kind of leave allocation if they can't carry it over. But it's a fair point that we'd need to, before we move to anything like a sort of permanent 4-day week employee, we need to do at least a year's trial to understand, throughout all of those seasonal periods, what is the evidence that we're collecting. And there'll be, plenty of things that we don't anticipate now, that as we collect evidence over the longer period, we'll find out. So the chair's sighing at me now. So
I'm not. Sorry, I was sniffing. I'm not
right.
sighing.
The City Council, I think, because we had the research questions in the field regarding health and well-being, and that research was being collected right up until the day before we announced the trial. While I'd had conversations with the Chief Executive of the City, I'd asked him to keep it confidential, and so I'm responsible for having not necessarily briefed City members in the same way that I had our own members. But following the announcement and briefings that we've done, I think they're certainly supportive and interested. They will be scrutinising the report at their, I think it's called their Scrutiny and Resources Committee on the 10th of October. So I'll be attending that meeting and answering any questions that they have. And I'm sure, you know, as our own members have, there will be plenty of questions. On reimbursement, so there won't be any changes during the trial period in terms of how we run the shared service in terms of finances, at least none that I anticipate. Other than that, well, because we're unlikely to see savings during the 3-month trial period, because we anticipate those savings coming from kind of being able to recruit more full-time people and therefore spend less on agency, it's unlikely that that would happen during the trial period. If that would happen during the longer-term period, obviously the shared service has, you know, is funded by both the City and South Cambs on the basis of cost drivers related to number of applications and, you know, the work that's being done. So if there were saving in staff salaries, then those savings would feed through to the City Council. And I hope that's the question that you asked. It wasn't, okay. Shall I get to the end and then... which councillors will be interviewed? Certainly we'll be interviewing members of the opposition as well. That's, you know, from my perspective, really important. And did you answer the question about the national press being briefed? You did.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting. Do you want to come back on any points that haven't been picked up, Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, it's just a couple. It was one that got missed is how many manpower hours are reduced through the trial. That question didn't get answered. And it was, we discussed overtime, but my question was, where are we classing overtime during the trial? So if somebody goes up to does their 30 hours, and let's face it, none of us know what's around the corner at the moment, we have to get them to do more. Are we paying overtime on 30 plus or on their contracted 37 plus? That was my question as to where the overtime cut-off comes in. My question around pay rises was, will there still be a need for negotiations on pay rises? I didn't get an answer as to whether we would still need to negotiate. The other thing that hasn't been answered is in relation to performance-related pay. I have the market supplements, but not performance-related pay. Have we got many people on performance-related pay that could be impacted? And in relation to the Cambridge City, perhaps what would be really helpful, Leader, is for us to know how we calculate their contribution towards the service, because I'm guessing it's not just a 50-50 split. I think we've had that in the past. So if we're paying on an hourly or daily rate, then, for example, that would then be affected. So maybe if we could have some more understanding as to how our calculation is, I think that would be really helpful, because there's a concern that we will end up sort of, you know, paying the difference otherwise, which might not be an issue, but without seeing it, we just don't know. If that could be answered respectfully.
Thank you very much. Liz?
Thank you. I'm not sure I can answer all of them in the meeting, so I'll come back to you on a couple of them, Councillor Williams. On the city, and so the way that the budget's constructed, and it's probably too much detail for this meeting, that there are some areas of planning where the split is 50-50. For example, something like planning policy, where we both require, you know, the planning policy team to work for both of us to write a local plan. There are some areas, for example, in DM, where it's, you know, the split is income driven, and linked therefore to planning applications and workload. So what we will need to do in the longer term, should we do the longer term trial and deliver the savings, is to work through how those savings would sort of flow through that financial model. So on performance-related pay, I think there's only 1 or 2 people who are on performance-related pay in the organisation. So I don't want to speak about that because you know, I don't think it's appropriate to identify them. On negotiating pay rises, we're obviously still in the negotiations for this year, and anything negotiated will be backdated till April. We would then start new negotiations next year, as we do every year. I don't want to sort of preempt what will happen with the trial, but clearly if we were to move to being a 4-day-week employer, I think that would be a significant benefit that we could put on the table in terms of our negotiations. And I don't really want to preempt anything other than to say that I think that would form part of any negotiations that we had. Can I come back to you on the other questions on overtime and the hours reduced, because I'd like to make sure I get the right numbers.
I'm happy to have a response after the meeting on that, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. So if there, I'm going to come to Councillor Rippeth to second this and make her points.
Thank you, Chair. I come to this with a different perspective as well, and also thinking about a broader thing across the country, probably across the world. Post-COVID, I think all of us are really re-evaluating our work-life balance and how we conduct ourselves, how we conduct our lives generally. And has already been mentioned, retention and recruitment is a problem and we can't just do nothing. But the idea behind this is to work more effectively, to work smarter. And as was presented to, I believe, all of us, the 4-day week is not a pay increase. It's 100% of the work in 80% of the time with 100% of the pay. I think that's really important to have that in mind. And thinking about people's well-being, if you feel happy, if you feel like you can manage to do your job because there are more people in your department, for example, planning, I'm just going to take that example, and you're not trying to do the job of 2 people, it improves your efficiency. I think that's anywhere, any person's job. And I feel that this is the right thing to do. It chimes with my values and how we should be looking forward in a 21st century workplace. And surely if you've had 3 days, you are going to be refreshed for the 4 days, so you work better. But this is also, as people have pointed out, we're not a business in the sense that's just what we are. We're here to serve the residents and businesses, but the residents of South Cambridgeshire. And this, I'm hopeful, and it is a trial, and that's what a trial's for, to try it, will actually deliver improvements for the lives of those people living in the district. Because if you can attract people to work and work more productively, and also, most importantly, make some cost savings, because at the moment, I believe I'm right, we have the equivalent of 23 full-time agency workers costing £2 million. And I gather from my colleague, John Williams, who's not here today, so he can't correct me, we would be able to save £1 million. And that £1 million would be not only a saving of money towards services, grants, etc., to help our residents, especially bearing in mind the cost of living crisis, and everybody is tight, short on money, looking to see how can they get through this winter, how can they get through the next winter. I think that's a really important point, that £1 million could be saved, apart from the health and well-being of our staff, that also has such a positive impact across the area. And as we know, agency staff come and go. People might start on a planning application with one person. Sorry to use that example again, but it's quite a handy example, which impacts a lot of people. And then it changes to somebody else because there's a new member of staff. It's so much better if you can have permanent staff in an organisation such as ours, because then they have that experience, the continuity, and security as well. So things work more efficiently. And finally, this is a trial. It's an attempt to address an issue and to head it face on. And I am really hopeful it will prove to be fruitful and in the long run will be beneficial to the residents of South Cambridgeshire. And so I wholly support it and I'm happy to second it.
Thank you, Councillor Rippeth. Okay, so the recommendation set out at paragraph 5, I'm going to read it. A, approve a trial to be run from January to March 2023, preceded by a planning period of 3 months. B, request the Employment and Staffing Committee to receive update reports at its meeting on 10th November 22 and 23rd of February 23, with a view to reporting back to Cabinet after the end of the trial, making recommendations as appropriate. C, receive feedback from the City Council Strategy and Resources Committee on the 10th of October and continue to keep this committee updated with information during the planning period and trial. Do members agree with the proposal?
Agreed.
Anyone wish to vote against? Anyone wish to abstain? Cabinet therefore agrees the proposals by affirmation. So we're now going to move on to a proposal to exclude the press and the public. It's the point in our agenda where we need to consider whether to exclude press and public from the meeting. This is because the next items contain information which is commercially sensitive. Members of the public are advised that if Cabinet agrees to exclude the press and the public, the video stream will end. I therefore propose that the press and public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items of business in accordance with section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972 on the grounds that, if present, there would be a disclosure to them of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act brackets as amended. Is that seconded?
Yes, happy to second.
Do members agree with the proposal? Anyone wish to vote against? Anyone wish to abstain? Cabinet therefore agrees the proposal by affirmation. Members of the public who are watching the webcast, this means the video stream will now end. Thank you very much for joining us to view today's Cabinet meeting. I note the next meeting of Cabinet is scheduled to take place on Monday the 14th of November 2022 at 10 o'clock.